Hi everyone, marine weather with Joel Curtis, your meteorologist from the National Weather Service, Alaska Region Operations Center, and today is Tuesday, June 25th. So starting out with today's ice edge, first of all, there's just one area of ice that's formed up in Kotzebue Sound. The whole scene is drifting toward the north, but there's just kind of closed up just a little bit from about Point Hope on out into the Chukchi Sea. And other than ice, that one in barrier, the ice is definitely retreating to the north. So for tonight's weather, 974 millibar low in the central Bering Sea, fully wrapped, occluded front around that. Some wind definitely with this system and a bit of a fetch, but it's generally a circular low, so the wind directions are varying as wherever your position is, but there is some southeasterlies along the southwest coast. Also, we've got a high pressure, 1020 millibars in the central Gulf, and we have a thermally driven trough of low pressure over the central interior. So for Wednesday, thunderstorms up country associated with that thermal trough, and the front has moved a little bit closer to the beach in southwest. 977 millibar central pressure on that low, some westerlies in the Aleutians. And note that that triple point down there where the fronts all meet, a low has formed to about 1,006 millibars. In the meantime, high pressure over the Gulf, still 1,020 millibars. And not a whole lot of pressure gradient in the Gulf until you get down south of Kodiak Island. So then for Thursday's weather, again, thermal trough over the central interior, lots of thunderstorms up in there. 1076 millibar high still remaining over the central Gulf of Alaska, and that triple point low that formed up is now 1,005 millibars, and it is drifting to the east and actually sagging a little bit toward the east-southeast. And then we have our main low that's now beginning to fill, and the front along the southwest and western coast is really, really weakening. So I drew it in as that dashed line that you see there. So looking at our marine forecast for southeast on Wednesday, on the outside waters, we got westerlies and northwesterlies, 10 to 15 knots, seas up to about 4 feet. And then on the inside waters, variable directions, around 10 knots, seas 2 feet. And then for Thursday, we start pulling in some southerlies on the inside waters, 10 to 15 knots, seas up to 3 feet in Lynn Canal. But on the outside waters, 10 to 15 knots, again, generally westerlies, including some northwest direction, and seas up to 5 feet off of Cape Omni. And that's due to that high pressure still remaining out over the Gulf. For the south central waters, 10 to 15 knots in the central regions, including Prince William Sound, about 10 knots, seas up to 3 feet around Cape Suckling or so. But then as we get down toward Kennedy Entrance, what you see is the wind ramping up 15 to 20 knots and seas 5 feet. Now part of that is sea breeze. In other words, some of the wind is driven by sunshine and thermal low pressure on the inside, but it also is beginning to feel that low out in the Gulf of, out in the Bering Sea just a little bit. In the meantime, generally westerlies in the rest of the Cook Inlet, seas up to 3 feet, and that is due to sea breeze. And then for Thursday, variable around 10 knots just about everywhere except for Kennedy Entrance. Again, that southeasterly, it's feeling that low out in the Bering, and seas up to 3 feet there. 3 feet in Cook Inlet, otherwise 3 to 4 feet in the outside waters and only 2 feet in Prince William Sound. So for the Alaska Peninsula, Shelikof Strait, easterly 20 knots, and that's feeling that low. 20 knots off of Kodiak, seas up to 5 feet. 25 knots off of Shuganak, and that's seas up to 9 feet. So a southeasterly swell starting to show up in there too. But notice on the Bering Sea side, wind ramping up to 30 knots and seas up to 8 feet, whereas on the Pacific side or the Gulf side, you've got 25 knots and seas up to 9 feet. And then that low weakens in the Bering Sea, so now you start to see the winds back off a little bit. 15 knots for most of the Pacific side and the Gulf side. However, down by False Pass, it's still up to 20 small craft advisory, 25 knots. 25 knots on the Bering Sea side, seas up to 8 feet, but as you get into Bristol Bay, about 15 knots, seas 5 feet. So then, now we're looking at that low on Wednesday, and how does it affect the Aleutians? Well, there's a lot of gale force. Wind speeds ranging from about 30 to 40 knots, but most of them are gales 35 to 40, and plenty of sea to go along with this. And it's had a good long fetch time, so what that has is allowed the sea to build up to a fully arisen sea. So you're seeing a lot of sea states in the upper teens. But then on Thursday, as that low weakens, you also see the wind start to back off. So about 15 knots in the far western Aleutians, sea 6 feet. But then 25 to 30 knots as you get further east, again on the south side of that low, and seas up into the teens in a few places. Then for the West Coast, first of all, starting out with a strong low in the Bering Sea. You got 40 knots off of Cape Newenham, seas up to 12 feet, 35 knots for the Pribilos, seas 16 feet, 35 knots off of Cape Romanzoff, but seas 7 feet with a very short fetch. And then you go all the way up to Norton Sound, and it's only 20 knots out of the east and seas 4 feet. On Thursday, you see a lot of those winds die off, but they're still formidable. So 25 to 30 knots on the outside, except for Bristol Bay, 20 knots. And as you get up to Norton Sound, easterlies 15 knots, seas 3 feet, but the maximum sea you'll see out by the Pribilos and St. Matthews about 12 feet. So now for the North Slope. Generally easterlies because that high pressure is off of Banks Island, and still over ice. Any leads you might ramp up to about 2 feet or so. And then as you get down into the Chukchi Sea and toward the Bering Strait, 15 to 25 knots and seas up to 5 feet. And then for Thursday, now some northeasterlies start to kick in for the North Slope. Seas up to 3 feet and 15 knots of wind. 20 knots in the Chukchi Sea, seas up to 4 feet, and for ice-free waters. And then anywhere ranging from about 10 to 20 knots as you get down to the Bering Strait, and seas up to about 3 feet. So that's it for your marine forecast. Please let people know where you're going out there on the briny deep, and please stay safe out there. Thanks for listening.